Warning, this podcast is not for the faint of heart.
We keep it real and raw.
And talk about issues that other podcasts wouldn't dare. This is the Truth of the Matter podcast with Dr. Spencer. Step into our world. What do you do if you fall in love with one of your kids' friends who's over 18? How do you handle getting caught in bed with your boss? Why do girls like bad boys? Are you burned out from an unbalanced career and personal life? Are you still working while your kids are telling you how their days went? Our passion is to help people in relationships, anyone you have a connection with in life, neighbors, coworkers, family, spouse, kids, yourself, and helping you achieve the work-life balance. Let's have some fun and let's get educated. This is the Truth of the Matter podcast. And now your host, Dr. Lamarr Renee Spencer.
Look at that. I bet you it's some like little glitch somewhere. Are you there, Ron?
I'm here.
Well, thank you so very much for joining me today. We always talk like almost every day, and we talk about different issues. And so we talk about things that I feel like are like really important. Some of the things that we talk about is not always welcomed, right? But you and I both are sort of controversial people, and we like to talk about the things that others may be afraid to talk about, but trust me, it's on their mind. So the other day, of course, we always come up with different shows that we would like to talk about. And I said, you know what? I think we need to talk about how sometimes women, I'm a woman too, so hey, don't hate on me, how sometimes we are the problem in relationships. And so I wanted to talk about that because you know how it is. Sometimes, or more often than not, men always get the short end of the stick. If I say I could start an argument and you can, kind of say, you know what, I'm done with it, I'm going to take it from there, then people will start believing me. But it doesn't mean that I didn't start or I didn't start and finish it, right? You may have just said one little thing to kind of tick me off, and then I go tell everyone, especially we know now when it comes to social media, I mean, things can go viral in a matter of seconds, it seems, or even days, especially if it's something that we know is not educational. It could be what they call ratchet. Oh, you're going to go viral because people are going to use it and everybody else, and they probably going to, just take what I said. And don't get me wrong. You got all these organizations out there, Me Too, Time's Up, and there's probably some sub-organizations under that, right? But there's not many out there for men, right? And so, like I said, we sometimes are the problem in relationships, not always the solution. Now, let me put this disclaimer out there because I know it's going to be one or two out there or more than that is going to hit me on the inbox and say, oh, but what about women? What about, when I realize is when you become faced forward on social media, you get all types of people that are going to try to not so much create a dialogue, but that's going to argue with you. So today we're talking about how sometimes women are the problems in a relationship, and also from a female perspective, what can we do to not add to the problem? I'm a victim. I have to say I am guilty too. My mouth can be reckless. Okay. You can be the strongest and I can tear you down so quickly and may not even have to use a curse word. But I know I can be reckless, and I have been reckless. I have to say, I try now to be more conscious of it. But sometimes we don't even have to raise our voice. We could say some slick and oh my God, it'll tear you down. Right? So Ron, let me just ask, you're married, happily married. And plus on top of that, You've been a cop, so you're used to dealing with the public on both sides. And also, like I said, you talk to women every day. So we're going to put it right out there. What can we do, right, to not be so darn reckless?
Well, I think that as a mature man, you have to understand that what you call the reckless mouth is for women a defense mechanism. Most women are not going to have the physical strength to fight and win against a man. Not that there are not some women that are not skilled. Some are martial artists. Some women are just physically stronger than men. It happens. But we're talking, for the most part, that's not the case. So women will use their defense mechanism, the mouth, in order to, I guess, defend themselves, right? Or to get some kind of response out of that man. Sometimes you may seem or feel as if you're being completely ignored, as if he's not hearing anything you're saying. You know, he's sitting there staring at the basketball game, and you have something you feel is vitally important and he needs to know, and he needs to know it now. So out of frustration, you might say pretty much anything, right, to get some kind of response, to let him know, hey, I'm in the room with you, and I deserve just as much attention, you know, as LeBron James, right? So mature men understand that, and you try not to take things personally, because if you internalize things, then what happens is, well, you said something and I need to say something in retaliation. And what happens is we end up saying things that we cannot take back, saying things that are so hurtful that it's hard to recover from that. Because keep in mind, if you've been in a relationship with somebody for any period of time, they've told you some of their innermost secrets, things that they may not have shared with other people. And the last thing you need to do is get into an argument where you go into that area. You go into that wounded place that you told me in confidence, and now in order to retaliate, I'm dragging that up. And sometimes saying I'm sorry is not enough. You know, you've hurt them so deeply, you know, when you bring up that past pain and anguish. So I think we need to be mindful of that. And I think that we live in a society where we don't sit down and discuss our issues. You know, we yell at each other, we scream at each other. You know, if you look at the news on any given day, people in this country are killed every single day. And a lot of times it's a split decision, right? I guess the word I'm looking for is, it's almost instinctual. You don't think about what you're doing. You just react. And in a relationship, sometimes you need to take that second or two to think before you say something that could really damage the other person. And, you know, for women, I think that you really need to understand who you're dealing with, right? Your partner. And we all, men and women, have to learn how to argue. It's not just yelling and screaming and saying things and to hurt one another. An argument is supposed to be an exchange of ideas. So you're letting me know what it is you need from me, and I'm letting you know what I need from you. And we can do that without raising our voices, without becoming angry or confrontational. And I think that's a lesson that all of us need to learn.
Right. But Ron, you know, we were talking about this yesterday, right? Some of us have functioned in dysfunction. So we were taught and we learned that we didn't learn effective communication. When you're pissed, right? And we never learned that, okay, we're going to sit down and we're just going to talk about it. Our sit down and talk about is, I'm going to cuss you out because I'm going to feel a little better, right? Now I have to say, right, until I became older, more mature, even professionally and personally mature, I have to say, like, I learned how to use my words better and more effectively. Now, of course, right, it's easy to say, well, you know what? I already knew. I knew, but I didn't practice them. Now it's easy for me to, okay, put these words and speak calmly at work because that's my place of business. But when it comes to personally, we're dealing with so many types of personalities, and most of them are like-minded. They want to cuss me out like I want to cuss them out. And in relationships, it's like, all right, you know what? I'm mad. I've gone from 1 to 10, and there's no middle ground. So I'm going off now because I need you to hear me and I need you to feel what I'm feeling. Hey, Zane. So even with something like that, so how can we calm down, Rusa, and I get my point across effectively?
Something I've learned, and I need to constantly remind myself of the fact that when you allow someone to make you angry, who is in control of your emotions? You or them?
Mm-hmm.
And it's them. You will act out of character no matter where you are. You could be at work, you could be in the supermarket, you could be at home. But once a person pushes the right button, you're going to go off.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you recognize it and say, you know what? No, I'm not going to allow you to take me there because I'm not in control of myself. You are. You're controlling my emotions. And I think that's something that is very important to keep in mind in a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to keep our emotions under control. Again, we can sit down and we can have a discussion, and it could be a heated discussion. But at the end of the night, right, we can lay next to each other in bed and, there's no discord anymore. We got past that. And I think that what happens is when you go from 1 to 10 quickly, a lot of times that's not necessarily an issue that's going on. Sometimes that's an issue that is built up over time. Sometimes it's things that you've been holding on to for some time that you should have spoke on
Mm-hmm.
initially. If you have a leaky pipe in your house, you don't wait till the water's flowing, through your living room before you say, oh, I need to fix this. So if there's something that is bothering you, the time to speak on it is now. Tell me what it is I'm doing wrong or you feel is wrong before it builds on you. And that's typically what happens. You let it build on you. And it's like you put air into a balloon, you put so much air in, the balloon pops, right? Same thing happens with people. There's too much frustration that's been building up for too long, and then it all comes rushing out. You call it being reckless with the mouth. Well, that's just frustration and anger that's been building up for some time. Maybe you didn't feel comfortable coming to talk to me. Maybe you didn't feel the time was right or whatever. But over time, it just kept building. So that little spark just sets it off. And it might make you feel better temporarily, but then it creates another problem.
Right. So, okay. So, how do we not come across as nagging? Because maybe, let's just say in a week, I have about 5 or 6 issues that's on my heart to talk about. So,
Mm-hmm.
that means that in a sense, would I come across as being nagging?
Well, again, my suggestion is if something comes across your heart or you feel it, speak on it. Don't
Mm-hmm.
hold it in because the heart is not a good place to hold stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, that anger, that frustration becomes toxic. And so many women, particularly sisters, end up with things like breast cancer from all the frustration, the anger, the environmental situation, the pollution, everything else. It all builds over time. And you find that breast cancer is an epidemic. And, my wife is a survivor, and a good friend of mine who's like a mentor to me and spiritual advisor says a lot of times that's caused by women, sisters in particular, holding on to stuff for so long that it becomes toxic. So the idea is if you feel something, speak on it. Let it be known. Don't hold it in. And we talk about nagging. I think a lot of men interpret being told something more than once as being nagging. Now, everybody has to create a new term, a nag filter, right? For some guys, immediately, oh, you're just being a nag. You're just nagging me for no reason. Other guys, nah, it doesn't bother me, right? I understand you want me to do something. Okay, I'm going to do it. I may not do it exactly on your schedule, but it's going to get done. But I think if it's a constant situation where you constantly have to go and remind him of something, then there's a deeper problem. It's not just nagging. There's a much deeper problem.
Oh, sorry. So even like that makes sense. So even when I'm talking to someone, right? Let's say, for instance, I have a client, and I mean they're trying to tell me something, but I can't interpret because it's like they're pissed off, they're going so fast, and I'm like, wait a minute, let's slow down. Let's start from the beginning, and like I'm having to, try to coach them. But the thing about it is, you're right. So often, to me, it seems that this has become a norm. I was in the store yesterday and this couple was in there arguing. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like the guy didn't say anything. Not, well, put it this way. I didn't hear him say anything, right? We don't know what could have transpired. And I mean, she was going off. And I mean, I felt kind of bad for him because I'm like, oh my gosh, she was like hitting below the belt. And I know in some of my posts, I talk about how to argue and fight fairly. When I say fight fairly, I'm not saying punch them in the gut instead of the face. I'm saying when you have disagreements, you're right. You have to address the situation at hand, but don't bring up everything that has happened in the past and weave it into this. So you're right.
Mm-hmm.
And don't sit up there and talk about his mama, his cousin, things that is going to be like a sticking point.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's true, like sometimes we go overboard so badly that again it goes viral, and this could actually cost this man his livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
We don't like to believe it, but it does.
Well, that's when your emotions have taken control and you're not thinking anymore. It's just, you know, we are supposed to be the highest expression of the creator. We have the ability to wisdom, to reason, to understand, right? Well, while now we act like animals, we act instinctively. We don't think about things, we just react. And sometimes you get so angry, you don't think about the ramifications. Could he lose his job? What about the financial pressure that'll put on the family if he does? What if I push him to the point where he wants to leave, or he wants to go seek a divorce, or he goes to seek the comfort of another woman, one who may not put that same amount of pressure on him?
Mm-hmm.
Now, some pressure is healthy. We all operate under pressure. Some of us choose to, I guess, what we do is we attempt to avoid pressure by any means necessary. But that's life. It's a struggle to come into the world. Not every sperm is going to reach the egg. And, when a woman is bringing life into the world, it's called labor for a reason, which you well know. So life is a struggle. Some of us, and unfortunately, we got some brothers out there that want to avoid the pressure. So when the sister puts some pressure on him, saying, hey, brother, I need this from you, they might be the ones who will quickly leave because maybe they've never been put in a situation where there are real expectations on them, and vice versa. Sisters will take off running too because sometimes they have never had any expectations put on them. And in a relationship, you rely on one another. You have expectations from me and I have them from you. And, sometimes if you're not used to that, uncharted territory, you out the door.
You're absolutely right. So, okay, so let's go back to something you said, right? And I'm not quoting, I'm just kind of paraphrasing about him going out the door, possibly to someone else. So when that happens, right, people rally around us and say, no, girl, that has nothing to do with you. That's all on him. He made that decision. So what do you say in a situation like that?
I think that when a relationship ends, I think it is both parties, I believe, that have some degree of responsibility. Some may have a much greater responsibility than others, or than the other. But I think it is both parties that have to take some degree of blame. Now, what happens is we automatically assume that it is the man, not necessarily. There are a lot of men out there who are doing, a great job as a husband, as a father, as a provider. Those who, and people say that men cannot take um, when their wife or girlfriend goes out and has an extramarital affair. Well, that's not true. I mean, we know it's pretty well publicized what happened with Will Smith. And Will Smith stood by Jada Pinkett Smith, his wife. And, the two of them, from all outward appearances, are still together, still happy, right? So it can happen. No, it is not always the man who's responsible. Sometimes, yes, you have the woman who, for whatever reason, pushes him away. And sometimes it's based on past relationships or, not being able to deal with their emotions and their feelings. So I think it's a combination of those things.
I agree with you. I think it could be both parties, right? And I think that we have to take accountability for the part that we have played. Because I always say we learn from people in projects. So for me, especially being divorced, I'm not going to be like, oh, it was 100% his fault. I played no part in it at all. No. Sometimes people, you may not be right for each other, but that doesn't mean that you're bad people.
Right.
By the time you try to reel the situation back in, sometimes it's just hard, right? Because
Hmm.
what are you going to say? Okay, for all these years, I've done this, I've said this, let me try to fix it. Well, unfortunately, again, it's so hard because we know by the time you go through the paperwork to get a divorce, you have already been separated for a couple of years at least, maybe a year or two, but it has already transpired. And you have in your mind that, you know what, I'm right, they're wrong, it was their fault. It may not be always the case. And then, of course, we have these outside forces that have added to the situation, right? Prime example, I tell women all the time, don't tell your friends, even your family, what goes on in your house, because they will definitely add to the situation. You may have one or two that may say, you know what, I'm staying out of this. But for the most part, you're going to have people who are going to definitely give their opinions based on what you have said. Go ahead. Did you have something to say?
Well, I think that people listen to respond, not necessarily to listen to understand, but to listen to respond. So you're going to have that.
Mhm.
Some instances, you should let people know what's going on. If you see where the situation is, say, escalating, right, to the point of potentially being violent, then you need to let someone know that. And the other option is not, I mean, the other responsibility is to protect yourself by separating yourself from that situation and from that person if you see it may become a violent situation. And that can happen. We see where people are abused every day in this country. The vast majority of them are women. Are there men who are abused? Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Because you have some women who, out of anger and frustration, will lash out. I mean, I've seen women, pull knives on men, pick up bottles, any kind of weapon they could find. And it didn't seem like the argument was that serious. But when you've been holding in anger and frustration for years, or maybe you came from an environment where you saw violence and it was woven into the fabric of the family, that's what you revert to. You don't sit down and talk about things. You do what you saw as a child. And if you saw mama beating on daddy or daddy beating on mama, well, that's what you're going to do. And it does happen quite often.
Yes, I mean, I sent you a post yesterday. I think it was yesterday of this woman trying to, run over this man, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then not too long ago, there was another where she actually ran him over. He didn't die instantly, but a couple of days later, he died. And so now she's in court, and they're saying, we've upped the charges from attempted murder to like first degree murder, and she's like
Mm-hmm.
shocked. And I'm saying, well, why are you shocked? Like, you ran him over with this car that's what, over 1,000 pounds? Like, you ran this man over and you meant to run him over. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. Sometimes you can let your emotions get the best of you, and you don't think about the long-term effects of it. And she's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, not guilty." Well, it's been videoed. You meant to hit him.
Well,
Well,
you know something, in cases like that,
mhm,
typically there is a great deal of support for the woman.
mhm,
I'm sure you remember this case. There was a woman by the name of Lorena Bobbitt
mhm,
who said she was being physically abused by her husband.
mhm,
So, in retaliation, she cut off his penis.
mhm.
And I think she threw it away somewhere as she was fleeing. Well, they fortunately recovered it, reattached it, so on and so forth. But there was a great deal of public support for Lorena Bobbitt.
Mhm.
When she said that her husband had been abusing her physically, I think she said that he forced himself on her sexually. A lot of women in this country supported her and said, yeah, I can see that happening. Even though we don't have any real insight or intel into what was going on in the house, it's just that in many instances, women seem to have more credibility when it relates to acts of violence against men. I guess the prevailing thought is that, well, he pushed her to do that. It wasn't until, I guess, pretty recent, history that we began to realize that women in this country are just as violent as men.
Mhm.
So we have women in jail serving really long prison sentences for acts of violence, robbery, murder, kidnapping, and crimes like that, years ago, we wouldn't think women capable of.
Mhm.
So, I think we have to keep that in mind when we're trying to make a determination as to guilt and innocence.
Mhm. No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, there's no and of course, especially being an officer, you know better than me. But when I look at the overall spectrum of the type of women, there's no like I've seen women from the CEOs of companies to women in the clergy, to your stay-at-home mom, your PTO mom. Like, is there like a certain type of woman that you've seen this happen with or know of?
You know what? There's no particular type.
Mhm.
You'd be surprised what people are capable of. Some of us have lost all sense of morality. We all have uh, something we're built with that's innate in all of us. It's called a conscience.
Mhm.
And some of us no longer respond to our conscience. Some of us just react. And other people sometimes, again, because you're holding on to things from childhood and you're in a relationship, it could, what happened to you as a child could have been 30 or 40 years in the past. But sometimes things happen and make you relive it all over again. And when you do, your instinct is to protect yourself. And sometimes you lash out, and sometimes violently, and people get hurt. Um, Again, in most cases, it's women. But you find that there are some instances where it is men who get killed or seriously hurt. And, when we compile statistics, most of the statistics, of course, are going to involve women because a lot of times men are going to report the fact that they were abused by their wife or their girlfriend
Mhm.
because people are going to question their masculinity. How you letting this woman run all over you? How you letting this woman beat on you? What kind of man are you? So a lot of guys won't say anything. So there won't be any statistics. There won't be any police reports. So, these guys are like some women suffering in silence.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I have to say, many moons ago, I mean, not even that long ago, but I've had men say, "Hey, I was abused, I was raped," I like all kind of things, and I'm like, "Yeah, right. Are you serious?" And yet, it was true. And like one of
Mhm.
them said, if I tell people, which I have, no one's gonna believe me. They're gonna laugh. They're gonna say, "Oh, you a punk, you all kind of stuff." Nobody's gonna believe it because guess what? At the time when they were telling me, I didn't really believe it because I'm saying, well, wait a minute. You've had all these women and this, that, and the other, but it didn't matter because that one or two actually violated them and no one believed it. But it actually happens. And even in certain circumstances, like one of them, guess what? That woman beat him and raped him, and they had a kid out of the result. So you're like, well, how did that happen? Because he had surgery on both feet. So it happens. We don't like to say it, but yeah, and you're right. The same as me, what I almost did was make up an excuse why it could have not been true or try to like flip it. And then I had to say, no, you know what? No, that actually could have happened. Case in point, we hear about all the things that happen to celebrities, or like you said, in the situation of Lamarr Bobbitt. But let's look at most recently of the whole Johnny Depp thing. Johnny Depp has been telling us all these years that that woman was abusing him, and no one believed it, especially too because some people say, oh, she was attractive. She couldn't have. But it was the truth because if he would have hauled off and hit her, because in one of the I was looking at the court case and she threw a wine bottle at him and it actually took off the tip of his finger. But if he
Mhm.
retaliated, guess what? He would have been locked up or he would have had more
Absolutely.
repercussions than her.
Well, I'll tell you something, right? Probably a more dramatic case is the one
Mm-hmm.
that you worked on and how we met, and that's the R. Kelly case.
Mm-hmm.
So things happen cause to effect.
Mm-hmm.
What we see is the effect.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really know the cause. Well,
Mm-hmm.
for somebody like R. Kelly, what happened to him as a child? He was, according to him, sexually abused by a family member. For people who are sexually abused, and let's be realistic, R. Kelly was a poor kid from Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
When this abuse was taking place, one, there's a question of who do you tell?
Mhm.
You know, people again will question your masculinity. How you let this girl take advantage of you? And for him, his single mother, she didn't have the resources, I would assume, to take him to get him some counseling and help he needs. So now we see the effect, of the abuse, of the frustration, of the anger. Unfortunately, a lot of times what happens is we take it out on people who are in similar circumstances to us, other poor people, our neighbors, our family members. There's the old saying, you always hurt the one you love. So the people that are closest to us are the ones that, hurt people, hurt others. And it's typically the people that are closest to us. And I think that's what happened with R. Kelly. And I think it happens with many men around this country and around the world.
Mhm. Right. We see the residual, right? But we don't always know like the entire story, right? So I always tell people, I'm like, look, when you want to tell a story, you have to tell the whole story. And you know that saying, there's three sides. There's his side, her side, and it's the truth. No, the truth is the truth. That is called perception or
Hmm.
exaggeration. But the truth is the truth. It doesn't matter whose side it is. Sometimes we come up, and you and I talk about it all the time. We come up with these statements that go all the way back. It could go all the way back to slavery or whomever. People say things, but they don't even know why they're saying it. They don't even know what it means. So we know that the truth is the truth. When you go to court or you go anywhere, they're going to say, okay, what happened? And they're not going to say, well, this is your side, your side. At the end, it's the actual facts, right? And you're
Hmm.
absolutely right. We see the residual. Just like I said, now, social media is a blessing and a curse because you could be anyone on social media. I can get up here, for an example, say, you know what, Ron cursed me out yesterday and he said X, 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 X. People gonna believe that. They're gonna be like, oh my God, girl, really? He must be terrible. And then they'll go a step further and be like, oh, well, you know what? He used to be this way. And I know so and so know him from here. They will add all kind of stuff to it. But come to find out, I'm the one who created it. I'm the
Hmm.
one who did all the things. But I just want people to hear me out because I'm mad. I'm letting my emotions take over. And I want people to really listen to me because guess what? You didn't. How many times you hear women say, well, you know what? To your point, right? Oh, I was saying something. I was telling him off, and I was telling him how I feel, and he walked away. He walked away, but now you don't follow him. And
Hmm.
no matter which room he goes in, you're following him there. He goes get in the car. You get in your car and you follow him. Now you're pissed off even more. So now you try to ram him with your car, right?
Hmm.
It's true. Just because somebody's walking away does not mean they're not listening to you. Maybe they see that it's about to escalate and they want to kind of, table the conversation at that moment. They ain't trying to leave the problem. They just don't want it to escalate because he know he might end up in jail.
Hmm. Absolutely.
You see that. So even I'm sure in your experiences, like I said, you're an officer, right? I'm sure you've seen situations where, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, where that woman could be the one calling the officer, or he could be, and you come and try to like diffuse the situation. That woman probably trying to hit you.
Well, you know something? Um, Ever since the O.J. Simpson situation
Hmm.
back in the early 90s, the laws governing domestic violence have changed dramatically. So nowadays, if you arrive at a house or wherever the situation occurred
Hmm.
and there are no signs of injury whatsoever, the law says you have to make an arrest. So you would arrest the primary aggressor. So that means if a man is angry at his wife, let's say his wife has been following him through the house and he's just trying to separate himself from her, he gets to a point where he's so mad he punches the wall. She picks up the phone, calls the police, and says, I'm I'm afraid. I fear for my safety. Well, why, man? What happened? Well, he punched a wall. The police are going to come and arrest him because he is now considered the primary aggressor. And he could have very easily punched her as opposed to the wall. Is it always fair? Of course not. The laws in this country are not designed to be fair. And that's sad. And the criminal justice system and even the family court system, when it comes to things like child support and things of that nature, favors women. So it is a tough situation. It's a fine line you have to walk. And for men, we have testosterone. I mean, women have it too, but in much smaller quantities. For us, we're socialized to be aggressive. When we're little children, we play, aggressive games. We play tackle football in the street, right? We play contact sports. So we're taught, to be aggressive. Well, when some guys, anyway, when you feel a woman is challenging you, it's hard for you to process, how do I deal with this? Some guys, any challenge, they immediately respond, they attack. Because, they're not used to being challenged, particularly by their woman. So they react. So I think for anybody who's contemplating a relationship, you should know full well who you're dealing with and how they act under pressure, because you want to find out the hard way.
But how do we find that out sometimes? Because they may not always display that when you're dating or courting. You may not find that out until you're well into that. When I say well into the relationship, till you already have feelings, you may not even know.
I think when we court and when we date, we spend a lot of time, or should I say we waste a lot of time, giving each other compliments and, oh, you so cute and you so fine and, oh, you smell good and, oh, and, all these wonderful things. That's the time you should be having conversation, because I need to understand, who are you? Who am I dealing with? Before I commit to you, I need to know, from a Black man's perspective, right? I need to know that my woman, I need to know that she's a companion. She's my friend. I need to know that I can trust her on so many levels. I need to know that she's going to be the right kind of mother for my children. I need to know that we can communicate in and out of the bedroom, that everything is not based on the physical. And for a Black woman, and Black women have for years been disrespected and unprotected. Women, all women, but particularly Black women, need to know that this man is going to protect me, that I don't have to fear anymore. I don't have to constantly be afraid anymore, that this man will give his life for me if necessary, that he will protect me and he will protect his children. I need to know that. I need to know that this man is going to go out there and make things happen. He's going to go out there and get a job, and he's going to provide, right? So these are things that need to be discussed. And I think women instinctively will know these things. If you're listening carefully, and if you kind of separate yourself emotionally, don't let your feelings get in the way. Because a lot of times when your feelings get in the way, there are red flags, but you ignore them. Things that he said to you may not sit right with you, but because, oh, he's cute, he's got nice eyes and he got some nice jewelry, drives a nice car, you ignore those red flags. Don't ignore them. Separate yourself. Yeah. Don't get too emotionally attached. till you know who it is you're attaching yourself to.
You're absolutely right. We have a comment here. So Denver Jager said, a case have two sides. Just admit when you're wrong and learn through it and become a better person. I kind of admit, I agree with that. You got to admit when you're wrong. I'm for one, I always say, you know what? I like to admit I'm not saying like to admit, but when I'm wrong about something, I'm wrong. There's just no getting around. Right. I think that's a whole process of learning and growing. What you think about it, Ron?
Well, absolutely. None of us are right all the time. We all have done wrong, and we all will do wrong throughout our life, right? None of us are perfect. Anytime someone does not and is unwilling to apologize is a person you need to distance yourself from. That is a person who is, I guess, divorced from reality, and is one of these extreme narcissists that believes, well, I cannot be wrong. Mm-hmm. Everybody else is wrong, but I am always right. So you need to distance yourself from him or her very quickly.
Right. So, okay. So you're dating someone or you're courting, because we know dating and courts look different, right? So you're in a relationship with someone. How do you find out, or you, like you said, have the conversations without sounding like you're interrogating them? So, like, for instance, example, so go ahead.
Well, again, like I said, some folks don't want to be put under pressure. But I learned something as a young man. I was in an organization called the Nation of Islam. So one day the captain said, brothers, do you know what a diamond is made of? And at the time we said, well, no, not really. He said, well, brothers, a diamond starts out as a lump of black coal. But he said under immense pressure and time, that coal becomes a diamond, and a diamond is the world's hardest substance. So pressure is not always a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that pressure makes you a man, makes you responsible, makes you a husband, makes you a father. But when you have those folks that really don't have any intention on being any of that, then those are the people that are going to say, well, you asking me way too many questions. Or may feel as if they're being interrogated. Listen, if you're going to let somebody into your life, into your home, you better interrogate them, because you don't know who you're letting into your home, who you're inviting into your life. And very quickly, your life can be turned upside down. So if a person is not mature enough to understand that, then it's time to date someone else.
Ron, you're absolutely right. I totally agree, right? And a lot of times, I remember one of my friends told me, right, she said, you know one thing, what you think is cute in the beginning will make you cry later on. And she was
absolutely.
Yeah. We think certain things is cute, right? And we like, oh yeah, he was just mad because he thought I was looking at somebody or whatever. Later on, you find out, no, he was like controlling you. He was, trying to alienate you. All these things, right? And you're right. And another thing I believe, right, is that sometimes even in relationships, you might start off being the real nice person, right? Mm-hmm. But then next thing you know, triggers happen. And next thing you know, those tables turn fairly quickly. And you're right, Ron. It's like you have to ask these questions. And I've heard when people say, well, gosh, why are you asking me so many questions? Because they're trying to avoid it. They don't want you to ask them those questions, because now they have to probably, go deep and go back to that whole past and look at their patterns. Sometimes people don't always want you to know everything about them or even a little bit about them, because you might run. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ron.
And that's the problem, right? We don't want to be asked the hard questions. And what happens is a lot of women don't require a man answer those questions, right? Mm-hmm. he comes along and he starts, like we say back in the day, rapping.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Can I get your phone number? And on the phone, you're not really talking about, you know, what's your dreams, brother? Where do you see yourself? Not just next year or 5 years. How about next week?
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing? And I think it is very, very important to find out what's your relationship with your family, particularly your mother, because your mother is the first person that you form a bond with. If you cannot or have not bonded with your mother, you can't bond with anybody. And it's not always, of course, it's not the child's fault necessarily. Sometimes the may be an addict. Sometimes the mother may have put this child up for adoption. There are so many things that can factor in. But if you have not been able to bond with the essence that brought you into this world, you are going to have a very difficult time bonding with anyone. And that's very important to know early on.
No, you're absolutely right. So, okay, that was a great statement. What about I've heard where, like, I had a client say, well, you know what? He treats me great, but he and his mother did not have a good relationship because she did, XYZ. What do you say to something like that?
Well, okay, if he's treating you well, right, then that's a situation between he and his mother. And that's obviously a situation that he has been holding on to for some time, and he needs to let that go. You know, it took me many years to understand that forgiveness is not for the other person, the forgiveness is for me, so that I can let it go, that I'm not holding on to toxic, emotions and energies. So forgiveness is something that we all have to learn, because I mean, you have these family situations where people don't speak for 30 years because you took the big piece of chicken at the barbecue, right? And we're still arguing about it 30 years later. So we need to be able to let things go and learn forgiveness, particularly amongst our family and our community, because Black people are peculiar in the fact that we will forgive other people, but we won't forgive our own people.
Ron, I want to disagree with you, but I can't. You are absolutely right. We will not forgive you for nothing. And I
Right.
know, and people say, that's not the case. Yes, they will. Yeah, they will. They will forgive everybody else. And the other person may have done something that impacted them way more than you or their family. But nope, they will not forgive you. They're like, you remember you disrespected me 20 years ago at a cookout,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but somebody just stole all your money, and you're like, okay, I forgive you because God told me I gotta forgive you to move on. But He didn't tell you to forgive in this situation too.
Right. Right.
You're right. And then something like that, next thing you know, it cascades, and all of your relationships are affected. And we know that relationships, we're talking about like intimate relationship here, but relationships is anyone that you have a connection to. All of these
Mm-hmm.
people are in a relationship with you, but we will not forget it. And I've had people even say, you know what, I'm stuck. I'm stuck right here on this, right there, what they did. So even what you think about that, when like you won't forgive people that's maybe closer to you, forgive everyone else.
When you hold on to these things, as I said, they become toxic energies, toxic emotions, and it begins to affect you. Again, it took me some time to learn this. Like, people would do things to you. Say something happens at work, you have a supervisor that seems to have it in for you, and they're just doing things that target you. Well, at the end of the day, you're angry, you're frustrated. Sometimes you're fearful that, is my job at stake? That person is going home to their family without a care in the world. You're going home frustrated and angry and fearful. So much so you get home, you're not communicative with your family. You can't sleep. You're not eating. You're so stressed out. We all have to learn to let go, right? Just release it. But holding on to it is only going to affect us. That other person, after they mess with you, they're going to mess with somebody else. You are the one who will end up, first of all, you start off with the antacids because you got stomach problems.
Yeah.
Then you got an ulcer. You know what I mean? Then you got heart problems because you're holding on to this stuff. And it's becoming like acid eating you up, part by part, section by section. So just let it go, forgive and move on.
Okay, so you know how people say, I forgive, but I don't forget. Is that kind of like the same thing?
If you're going to forgive but not forget, then you're not really forgiving. The idea is to just let it go, to completely release it. And that means forgetting what happened. Because if you're not, you're going to relive this over and over and over. It's going to come up again and again and again. And sometimes you have to stop and question yourself, well, why am I even thinking about this? I'm not even on that job no more. I don't have any contact with this individual anymore. So why am I allowing them to rent space in my head?
Mm-hmm. No, you're
Right.
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And God forbids if you have someone else that had an issue with that person. So now every time you talk to them, you're talking about that same other person that has hurt both of you. And guess what? They have that other person that moved on. They probably not even think about you. They may not even remember what happened.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, because
Absolutely.
how many times have you had situations, right, where you're still mad at that person, but you can't even exactly pinpoint what really pissed you off. You just know you're mad at them, but you can't remember.
Mm-hmm. That happens. That happens. A lot of times with these family situations, right? You don't remember what happened, 30, 35 years ago. Or the way you remember it may not be exactly how it happened. It is your version of the story, right? The reason you're angry is because the way you perceive something, it could have been completely different what actually happened. But because you want to hang on to the anger, like we'll never tell people what we did. We'll tell what somebody else did, but we're never going to tell what we did, what role we played.
Right.
So we'll give you our sanitized version of what happened, right? The relationship broke up. Well, man, look, she did this and she did that. Well, brother, what did you do? Man, listen to me. I told you what she did. Yeah, I
Yeah,
get that part. We heard you when you keep repeating it. But what did you do?
you're absolutely right. They will. They'll tell you everything everybody else have done, but not what they have done. And to me, that's a red flag. Because I'm saying, wait a minute, you didn't do anything. They just started going off on you. All these people can't stand you. They all pissed off at you, but you absolutely did that. Nothing. I always find in situations like that, oh, it's that person. They are the common denominator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They absolutely are.
Yeah. One of them type of situations where you say, I love them and I like when they come around, but I'm happier when they leave.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or when they coming in like the yard or to the, the facility, you're like, look, here's your plate to go. Because by
Right.
the time
Right.
you leave, everybody in here gonna be pissed off and cussing each other out because you're here.
Uh-huh.
You know?
That's why I said you got to be careful who you invite into your home and into your life because people bring with them energy. All of it is not positive. So you let somebody in your home, they leave, but they left the negative energy behind. So you find that a family that was close knit are suddenly beginning to have disagreements, arguments, right? We like to say, Christian folks like to say, well, the devil is responsible for everything, right? Well, sometimes the devil is you. Sometimes you bring in all the drama. And you have a track record of taking drama from one place to the other.
Yep.
To the point where, oh man, here they come.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well,
Look, y'all kids turn off the lights, nobody move, and maybe they'll think we're not home, right?
oh yeah.
Because the drama's coming.
No, you know what? You're absolutely right. We used to, like, in my grandmother's coming, here go that old Hellcat coming, trying to stir the pot with everybody, and you're absolutely right. It's them. You can't get around it. You're right. I mean, I wish I could tell some stories, but you're like, oh my gosh.
Right.
It's some of these things you can't even believe until you're there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do we all start arguing? Like,
Right.
what happened? Like, they know how to trigger you. Absolutely. But Ron, thank you so very much. I hope everyone has gotten something out of this. And of course, as always, you're going to see a lot more of Ron. And I never introduced Ron anymore fully because we're friends. He's like extended family and he's all over everywhere. So you'll always see him. So to me, to kind of keep introducing him, it's just like water over the bridge. And it just becomes like, people know Ron, okay? But Ron, you also do a radio show as well. Because, I was on yesterday.
Yes, you were. And thank you so much for coming.
Nothing. Okay, let me just say, right? So Ron's going to tell you where we were, right? But let me tell you, Ron took us out to brunch, okay? And he's been talking about these like colossal shrimp and grits, okay? And let me just say, I never was really a grit and shrimp person. Like, I never really wanted to mix them. I'm weird like that. But when I tell you, this food was out of sight. They even had, we ordered lemonade and they had the flour and the little rosemary, whatever was in there. And it was edible. It was so nice. And then I messed around and left my food in his car. Okay. And
yes, you did.
And later on you got your mouth set for it and you realize I forgot my food in the car. But it was phenomenal. So Ron, tell them what we were, your Genesis, your radio station, and then also tell them where we went to go and eat because we told this lady we were going to shout her out because you guys got to go.
We did. And for those of you who may visit the Poconos or who live in this area, you've got to go to the farmhouse on Crystal Street. Everything is organic. It is a minority-owned business. So please go out and support them. The food is, as Renee said, it is phenomenal. So please go out and visit them. And on Saturday, let me just add this: on Saturday nights, they have they turn the restaurant into a disco. So for those of us of a certain age, this mature crowd, go out and have a good time with them on Saturday night. It's the Farmhouse on Crystal Street in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania.
Yes, that food was so good. Like normally I have to say when I go out, I have to add something like salt, pepper. You don't have to add anything, okay? But make sure whatever you wear, ladies, because we're a little bit more self-conscious, wear something with elastic because your stomach will be sticking out, I promise you. And they give you a lot.
Yeah, they give you a lot of food. You can't eat it all in one sitting. That's for sure.
You cannot. They give you a lot. Go ahead, Ron. Go ahead.
And it's not expensive, or should I say overly expensive? It is moderately priced. So, 4 of us went out yesterday, and I think it cost less than $60 for all of us, drinks included. And we all took food home. There was that much food.
Yes, it was so good. Even the lemonade, you didn't have to add anything. You can just tell the freshness of the food. Even the lemonade, you can just tell it didn't come out of a can. You can tell. And even the waitress, she kept saying, well, how do you like the lemonade? How do you like? I made it. And I was like, okay, let me just see. Because especially my family's from down south and we know fresh. That food is so fresh. You would have thought that they've gone to some farm and picked all this stuff and made it. It was that fresh.
So I take it you be coming back.
Yes. Wearing elastic.
Okay.
You got to lose consciousness because you're trying to sink in your stomach.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah. But Ron, tell them where can we find, because Ron talks about like really interesting topics, and we're going to, be doing a lot of podcasts together. So I'm just putting that out there for you guys to look for. But where can they find you too, Ron?
They can find Renee and I, and the show is called Ron and Renee Reason for Reason. And we can be found over the Genesis radio platform. We're there Saturday mornings from 9 to 10. So please tune in and please give us some input. We have some very interesting topics, and we have some very good people like Dr. Spencer comes to join us quite often. So please tune in.
Yeah. So I'm telling you, it's been phenomenal. See, they call me Renee. Like my friends and stuff, they call me Renee. So they're like, Renee. But yes, I mean, they have great topics, and they want you to call in and talk about it. Yesterday, we went for, 2 hours?
Almost, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we were, and it's so I posted it on my page. Ron has it on his. So just go and listen to it. And he always has, I don't even know if there's a topic that Ron does not know about, okay? He always asks me every day, you read this book, you read that book? And I'd be like, no, I didn't even know where to find it. But yes, very instrumental in educating people. Again, he ain't for all the ratchetness and the crazies. He wants you to get something out of it. He always leaves you with something, always going to leave you with a food for thought. So please check him out. Like I said, we're going to be doing more. We're going to be doing more like these lives, these podcasts, and, just come and join us. So, but go ahead, Ron. I'm sorry.
Well, I thank you so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure to come on and be with you and to have you on our show. So just thank you again for thinking of me.
Oh, please. we always talking, so.
We do.
Yes. So without further ado, we're going to wrap it up. And again, your comments, trust me, Ron will probably be answering them too.
I'll be glad to.
Yeah, because I'm telling you, he's so well read. But thank you, everyone. And we're out of here.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. All right. Take care.
All right.
You've been listening to The Truth of the Matter with Dr. Spencer. Yes, we talk about taboo topics, but that's life, and we keep it real and raw. Our passion is to educate and enlighten. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review the show. And we'll be back soon. But if you have a unique relationship situation and you'd like help, or you're tired of having to choose between your career and personal life, Dr. Lamarr Renee Spencer is a life alignment strategist and a certified life, relationship, and business coach. So make sure to reach out. On Instagram and TikTok at Dr. Lamarr Spencer. On Twitter at Dr. Spencer 15. On Facebook at Dr. Lamarr Renee Spencer. And the website drlamarrspencer.com. Or go old school and call 973-214-6464.
Don't forget to purchase the book, The Depth and Diversity with Relationships. Find it on Amazon and the website.
See you next time on The Truth of the Matter.